Hello, listeners. I am sitting here with Dr. Jin Ong, and I am so excited to have you here on the podcast, Jin.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation that we had on my podcast. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you today.
Awesome. So Dr. Jin Ong is a cathartic release therapist and trained professionally as an osteopath, psychosomatic therapist, Western medical, acupuncturist, and herbalist. She has treated thousands of clients and founded the MetaMed Health clinics in New Zealand and hosts the Art of Listening to Your Body, which is an excellent podcast. And Jin, you work with complex physical and emotional conditions that don't respond to traditional and conventional therapies, including surgery. And you've also worked with cancer patients, terminally ill clients. Can you talk to me and the listeners a little bit about how your belief around the physical body as a manifestation of your emotional state?
Sure. How did that evolve?
Yeah.
Well, it's probably around 14, 15 years since I entered the world of osteopathy as a physical therapist, treating mainly musculoskeletal issues. I kind of fell into it. I knew that I always wanted to be in health. And it was quite funny because I remember asking at the university open day, do you have to touch people? But I actually really enjoyed it. I'm very grateful that I fell into that path because it was quite open-ended where you could go with that. But it was about, I remember 4 years in that I was getting really frustrated because I was very academic. I would learn all the things, I would do all the techniques. And when people weren't responding, just that small percentage of people weren't responding, I was getting really disheartened with my work and I was ready to give it up. So I then got my own little wake-up call, my own little pain story that had been simmering around for many, many years. But it was at that time that I started to look into the emotional aspect myself and also question what else was going on for my clients. So I knew that they had external stresses that were going on in their life. I knew that they had stuff like they didn't enjoy their job. They just had other external stuff that no one was really addressing or talking to them about.
Yeah.
And I know we've had this discussion for you as a trauma psychologist is that, well, for me as an osteopath, I wasn't really taught that you would talk to people about their emotional state and their stress. We knew about it, but we didn't really know how to handle it and how to interweave it to a truly holistic approach for these clients. But I was seeing it more and more. And as I said, I went through my own little mini health crisis with my skin, which was cystic acne, which then turned into like these crazy rashes. And then what I felt like was triggering an autoimmune condition. I'd have stiff ankles. I was getting really sick all the time. And I was like, what is going on? Everything else in my life is perfect on the outside, but why is my body flaring up like this? So that's when I had to dig down into the emotional aspect. And it was really around my work was that I could see there was this emotional stuff going on for them. And I wanted to speak to it, but I was in such a box that I felt like I couldn't. And so what it came down to for me from my own pain story was that I wasn't expressing myself fully in my work in the way that I knew how to, and I wasn't following my intuition. And that's where a lot of my health issues were coming up from, as well as the climate that wasn't suited to my constitution. And I went on to train as a psychosomatic therapist for my clients, thinking it was for my clients, yet I got to dig deeper into my own stuff, as most of us therapists who go down this path do. And then it just reaffirmed everything that I was seeing for them. And it gave me a way to be able to speak to them about the other stuff that was going on in their life, all of the emotional stuff. And that's when I started to see real shifts, real results, and people wanting more. And then, because a lot of people say, okay, well, who did you train with as psychosomatic therapy? And I'm like, well, that's not really what I do anymore. It was the thing that opened the door. And then it was through my clinical experience of just seeing many clients and seeing the repeated patterns of how their physical body or their mental body was presenting and linking it to the history, the events, the traumas that they'd had in their life. And so Yeah, it's probably over 10 years now that I just kept on seeing the patterns over and over again, and was able to put a structure to it. So interweaving Eastern philosophies and my own intuition into what is going on in the body. So I am a big believer that, as you say, your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. And really, it is that we go through life experience, events in our life, and we sometimes have what we view as traumas, and they're all associated with emotions that want to be released at the time. But when we don't give an opportunity for these to be released because we're too busy, or because we don't actually know how to express emotions, they get stored in your body as a source of stress. And so depending on the event or the issue will depend on where this emotion gets stored in the body. And we can cope with it until we can't anymore. And then it manifests as your issue, your pain, your injury, your illness, your disease. But also it can present as mental imbalances or behavioral issues. So some people won't have pain in their body, but other people will. It could be the recurrent injuries that eventually lead to surgery. It can be, removing body parts because you have issues with them, yet you're still left with the issues even though you take the thing out of your body.
Wow. Yeah. An extreme case for sure. Yeah.
Mm.
So tell me a little bit about, like, you interweave like Ayurvedic medicine as well as chakra work. Is that right?
Yeah. So I use lots of different modalities, and I still do pull on my conventional training as an osteopath, which I think some people say osteopathy is a bit out there, but I still use that knowledge because sometimes there is something physical that you do need to go and do something with.
Yeah.
And sometimes you've left it too long that you do need to intervene with amazing conventional medicine. But I always say, do the conventional thing, take the pill, take the supplement if you really need to, but do the deeper work. Get out of the pain and then do the deeper work. So I just forgot your question.
That's all right. I was asking about like coming into use Ayurvedic medicine and other philosophies that you weave into your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not professionally trained in Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, but I've worked with a lot of these therapists over the years. And I wouldn't say I teach people this in the traditional sense. So yes, I love to use doshas. So the Ayurvedic dosha profiling of the Pitta, Vata, Kapha, and just finding out what people's constitution is, because that comes back to what is your true nature. And how I love to use the doshas, it tells me how I can best work with my client, depending on how they're out of balance or what their true nature is. So I can work out how much I can push them before tipping them over the edge, or when I need to step back. It also can tell me what the likelihood of their reactions are going to be as well. And the other thing that I really love about the doshas is that people, and the chakras combining that, is people often feel like they have 12 to 50 things going wrong with them. They might have the sleeping issue, they might have insomnia, they might have thyroid conditions, they might have chilblains or Raynaud's in their hands, and they've got super dry skin, and they're this real skinny person that can't put weight on, and they might be prone to anxiety, and they think they have all these different conditions that they have to see all these different people for. But for me, that's just a clear Vata imbalance.
Wow. Can
And
you say more about the Vata imbalance? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I think you're a Vata.
Yeah.
So yeah, on that, the Vata, and only a really strong Vata will relate to this, because you are a mix of all three doshas. So you can be like 30% Vata, 30% Pitta, and then 40% Kapha, right?
Yeah.
But if someone is like 90% Vata, you're probably going to hear this. And it's when you look at the physical body of the Vata, they tend to be very lean. They can be tall, they can be short, but they don't have a lot of fat or muscle on them. And usually growing up, they're the ones that were told that they were the little insomniac kids that didn't sleep. They were always a little bit crazy, very sensitive, and they were usually in the lowest percentile with their weight when they were a baby, and always told that they needed to eat more to fatten up. But it's like, man, I eat piles of food, but I cannot put weight on. So on the eating side of things, usually they will be grazers. They don't have the big meals. And when they get stressed, they tend to stop eating. And even if they are eating, they tend to lose weight under stress, as opposed to a kapha, who usually will emotionally eat and gain weight, even when they're just eating an apple a day. What else is there? So when a vata is really imbalanced, and when they embrace this, it's like they own that this is their body type and there's nothing wrong with them. They're usually really enthusiastic. They're very lively. They're the life of the party. People do love being around them, and they're very creative. So they tend to be in design jobs, or, you know, with your work, it is very creative. Like, you have to be intuitive. You've got to just be able to go down different pathways. So very creative. They're usually full of ideas, but sometimes can have difficulty implementing them unless they have a decent amount of pitta in them. On the medical side, so when a vata starts to get out of balance, they'll usually have things like disturbed sleep or insomnia. They have a tendency to have more of the jittery, nervous type conditions like anxiety. When they are getting out of balance, they'll also have constipation, dry skin. Environmentally, they get very irritated by the wind. And a lot of people just don't realize this until they hear this, and they're like, oh, yeah, I am really irritated by the wind. So their anxiety goes through the roof. They tend to get a bit scatterbrained. They can talk really fast. They don't really focus on you when they've got too much going on. So they love space. They love the outdoors. And when things get too much, when they get overwhelmed, which is really common, they just check out. They just don't respond to anything. And they need complete space and time to reflect. And then they can come back to life. They're very spiritually connected, and they are usually the ones that will be subject to things like bipolar and schizophrenia, because they get very confused around all the messages that are coming into their minds. They're usually the ones that are prone to having thyroid conditions, so hyperthyroid, dry skin, poor circulation, so things like chilblains or Raynaud's when it gets really bad, period pain, low back pain, migraines. These are all very vata type conditions.
It's fascinating, because it really helps you, it helps you sort of frame your experience and really know how to balance your body in terms of, like, you know, you said, like, not to push certain people over the edge. How would you work with cathartic release with someone who's a vata versus a pitta?
Let me start with a pitta. The pittas are the ones that can just move through things so fast. And I know that I can push them. Even when they're a little bit out of balance, they want the next thing. They're so goals driven, and they're just like, give it all to me. I can handle it. And I want this over and done with quickly. So I don't mind going through the purge, which we'll probably talk about. I don't mind if stuff comes up, but I want to be back operating, and I want to be back working as soon as I can. So pittas, I usually can push them. And by the time we get after 4 weeks, we're doing business coaching. Whereas the vatas, I do give them a heads up that they might feel it's overwhelming, but that's normal. It's okay. And every now and then, we're just going to have to take a little bit of a breather, but just to prep them that, you know, big stuff can come up when we dig deep, and you're probably going to have to take 2 days out. Like, really do not organize anything after our initial few sessions. The thing is that when you actually process your emotions, lots of emotions that have been stored in there, so much can come out of your body, and stuff that you haven't in the past. And if we process this in a safe way, the downtime can be a few hours, or it can be a couple of days. It just depends. But a lot of old pain can come up to the surface, which actually stops people wanting to go there because it's a bit scary.
And there's so many directions I want to go in with you. There's so much to ask.
Yeah.
But
We
when
didn't touch on the chakras. Did you want me to just briefly cover that?
we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. But yeah, but I just like the incorporation of like different ways of people understanding their bodies and relating to their energy and emotions. Like I like sort of this interweaving of different disciplines, and you do your own thing with it. I think that that's something that I really feel listeners need to hear, that you have your, like, the things that you've drawn in that have been interesting you, or that you relate to, you can sort of weave that into how you present your material.
Oh, absolutely. And it has, especially with the dosha work, it's helped me understand people rather than think, why did this person not respond to this? And rather than just operate in my one track way, it's like, okay, I can adapt to you and I can adapt to you. And this is how you're likely going to respond. Because some people, we are very attached to, is it going to work? What's it going to look like for me? But now, having seen a lot of people, it's like, okay, I can kind of tell how this is going to play out for you.
So when people come to you, Jin, like, are they surprised by what comes out? Do people feel afraid? Do you find, like, how do people usually respond to your invitation to, move energy in certain ways? And you can sort of share how you do that with people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can go through the process that I do with people, and in terms of who comes to see me, I always say it's normal to feel nervous and excited because you don't know what's around the corner for you. But I'm sure there are also a lot of people, well, I have had this feedback. There's a lot of people, they're like, I love what you do, but I don't want to face it just yet. So they're not ready. And this is a big thing that I teach when I train practitioners. It's like, this work is amazing, but you have to be patient, that not everyone is ready for it. But the more we can talk about it and normalize it and just share what is available to people, maybe they'll come around in years' times. And that's what I've experienced, is that sometimes people come back months or years or even a decade later. They're like, I get it now. And now I'm ready. I've tried all the other stuff and it's been good, but now I want to go really deep. So as I said, because I do see a lot of people who don't respond to traditional alternative therapies, or they have gone down the conventional path. They've maybe seen psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, all the mind work. They are a little bit skeptical as well. It's like, is this really going to work? Like, I've done all this. What is wrong with me? And it's such a simple process. And people, we usually go through a history of, what are all the physical ailments going on in your body? What's all the mental stuff that you have issues with, past and present? And let's try and link them together using the chakras, using the doshas, and work out how we can understand you. And then we're going to go through and process some emotions. And usually there's some significant events in their life. And they say, well, I've already worked on this with so many therapists. I'm like, okay, but let's just do it this way, where we're going to give a voice and we're going to process the emotions that you never had a chance to process back then. And let's see what happens. And most of the time they are so surprised that there is still so much that wants to come out. And they had no idea. So rather than being led by them saying, oh yeah, okay, you've done that, I make sure I go there and just check, because if there's nothing there, we'll move through it within a few minutes or 5 minutes. But it's just important to go there and just explore it, because sometimes you have processed and done this therapy 10 years ago, but you've had so much more life experience that you can go back and look at it with a different lens. That's particularly right. If you've got like parent issues, but now all of a sudden you're a parent 10 years later. And then you're like, oh, now I understand.
Yeah, that perspective is key.
Yeah.
So what would you invite somebody to do, for example?
Okay. So even before I start working with people, I'm like, this is a safe space. There is no judgment. I'm not going to report you to anyone. You are allowed to talk about anything you want. Most importantly, you're allowed to be nasty. You're allowed to be negative. Now, not everyone needs to be nasty and negative. Some people need to actually go back and process some really positive memories and let emotion flow from that. But a lot of people avoid normal emotions, which include what we perceive as negative, like anger, like sadness, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And sometimes we need to say some really nasty words. But we cause harm when our emotional cup becomes too full and we just blurt something out to someone. We say in a nasty tone, we actually say the nasty words, or physically we actually hurt someone. And so this is about knowing that your emotional cup is too full and that you need to process some stuff, but you're wanting to do it in a safe environment. And sometimes we've become so good at not experiencing emotions that it needs to be facilitated. And so I'll share with you the process, and some people are going to be able to go away and do this, which makes me super happy. And if you do, I would love to hear about it. But other people, you know, if you're listening to this and it's just not dropping for you, it may be that you need someone to actually facilitate it, and can most importantly provide this safe space of non-judgment for you. So when someone comes to see me, I will usually go through that whole history, as I mentioned, and pull bits and pieces out. And my mind is working with the doshas and the chakras to work out, where is this all connected to? What is the root of this? My quick and easy thing that people can take away is just start screaming. If you have no idea what event even needs to be processed and you feel like your list is a mile long, all you have to do is just go out and scream. You can do it in your car, you can do it into the pillow, you can do it underwater, in the bath. Just find a place where you don't feel like anyone's going to listen to you and just let it rip. It's such a good discharge. But some people won't even be able to get this far of letting that voice out. Okay, and then I get into the processing, which is like 3 parts to it, and it's verbal dialogue. What's really important is that words are spoken. So I will normally get people to close their eyes down, and based on their history, I might be able to take them somewhere to a particular event. So it could look, sexual assault comes up a lot. It's really common in society. It can be the divorce of parents. It can be a relationship where you cheated on someone or they cheated on you. It can be fertility issues. It can be grief, loss, all sorts of things. It can be bullying in the workplace, and it can be some even more horrible, nasty stuff that has happened to people. What's key is that it's your experience. So I might pull something out based on someone's pain that they really want to shift. If they don't have anything like that, we just tune into the body sense, and it's no crazy meditation. It's just close your eyes down. Where does your mind take you in your body? And then who or what do you think about? And then the process starts. And I just ask them a few prompting questions. I say, okay, you're going to visualize that person, that thing, whatever it is, and you're going to say whatever you want to them. Be nasty, be mean, swear at them, use volume, use anger. You're allowed to in this moment, and don't feel guilty about it. I'm not judging you. Just let it rip. And then you're going to tell them, how is it that you feel after this experience or during that experience? And then you're going to tell them what it is you need from them. Now, some people get stuck on this, but it's okay. But if you can, just go through those 3 questions, and you might want to write them down and just have a look and prompt yourself and go with that flow. The more you do it, it gets easier. So a lot of emotion can come up, and pain can increase when you're doing this, which really helps you. If you do have physical pain, it can help you really make that link that my physical pain is linked with my emotions.
Yes.
So this is what I call the one-way conversation. Be nasty, rip into them, tell them what you think, tell them how you feel, and tell them what you need. Because a lot of the time we might have tried this, but it just got shut down. So we never had the space to say all this. Then I say we work into a 2-way conversation, which is you're going to have that person, and it's not always a person. You have that person speak back to you, but this time you're going to listen to them, listen to all of their excuses and reasons as to why they behaved the way they did. But you're going to listen with an open heart this time and give them that space. And this is often where understanding comes about. And what's typical is, the parent who was physically abusive. Yeah. It's like, it doesn't make it right or wrong that they treated you this way, but it happened. And why did they do it? Give them a little bit of space. And then you've told them earlier what you need to hear from them, and they're going to tell you what you need to hear from them. And a lot of people get stuck here thinking there is no way they would ever say it. I'm like, it doesn't matter, but just give a voice to it. You are always speaking out loud, and you're just letting yourself hear this. And often if there's resistance, there is just room for profound change. Just don't rip yourself off around this possibility of what if they could say this. And then we go into inner child or younger self conversations. So often there is stuff that happened decades ago for people, or I often say younger self is not just your 5-year-old self. It could be you yesterday that you need to go and speak to. So then you do the same thing. You go and speak to your younger version of yourself and give them the support that they need, because only you know what you actually need. No one else really knows. Even your parents don't really know what you need. So you're going to go back and give your younger self all the support that he or she needs. And then you're also going to give space for your younger version to ask questions, because especially if they're in pain or they've been hurt, a lot of future questions can come up. Like, am I ever going to be in a relationship? Am I ever going to have a baby? Am I ever going to have this job that I desire? It can be all sorts of things. And you forget that you never answered that to your younger self, even though all of those possibilities may have come to fruition. So it's just this full space of acknowledgement. And every time I explain this, I'm like, it's such a simple process. Once you get it, and you can see how powerful it is. And intellectually, you might be listening, but you need to actually go and do it. So with a one-way conversation, you have all these realizations. You hear yourself speak. Maybe you are actually being the nasty person you never ever wanted to be. So you have realization. When you do the two-way conversation, you come from a place of understanding. And then when you do the inner child or younger self conversation, you are able to offer the support that you never had. So it's kind of those 3 phases.
Yeah.
And you can do this with people who are no longer here on this earth. Sometimes the people are still alive, but they're not emotionally or mentally there. And so this process only requires you and your action.
It's amazing because it brings people through a process, because people do get stuck in certain places, right? Where they can get stuck in sort of the nastiness if they're giving themselves permission, and they can get stuck on the forgiveness part. They may not be able to forgive or listen with an open heart. But I really like that you take people through a step-by-step and repeatable process that they can then do on their own for when something else comes up. They're not necessarily dependent on you. They can follow those steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the people who are just like, I don't want to see you and I don't want you to know this nasty side of me, I'm like, well, go away and do this. And you just lead it yourself. But often what can happen is, if you have it facilitated, is, you can discover the blind spots, because we can only work on what we're aware about. But sometimes other people can see the deeper issues.
Right. Sort of the unconscious pieces. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. But you can definitely use this to shed like the superficial stuff. And sometimes you can go deeper with this on your own too.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated by, the physical manifestation of holding emotion. For example, in your own experience with cystic acne, how long did it take? How long was your somatic training, and how long did it take for those symptoms to remit?
Sure. So my acne, which was not cystic at the time, started when I was 14. So it wasn't until I was probably in my mid-20s that I discovered this emotional link around it. I went down the whole conventional pathway, the natural pathway, putting all sorts of nasty things on my skin, changing my diet, trying to control everything external in my life. And then, when I moved to Brisbane in Australia, which is very hot and humid, and I'm a pitta constitution, you stick me in heat and humidity, I go crazy. So that's where, I had the perfect job. I was earning really great money. I had great friends. Everything seemed really good, but the environment really wasn't good for me. And also I knew that I wasn't practicing the way I wanted to. So something deeper was drawing me to another path. So yeah, that was the environmental aspect that really flared up. And I realized that I wasn't listening to myself. I was seeking advice from other people, which was really great. But the key is to take bits and pieces that work for you. So even though I think Ayurveda is amazing, for me, I didn't follow like the whole Ayurveda thing. I just took bits and pieces and I really listened to my body. So that was 10 years ago that I discovered all this psychosomatic, the mind body stuff. But and I was doing all the external stuff that wasn't working. And the last thing left to do was like, right, I'm just going to express myself. So skin really is about your internal and external world boundary. It's fear of criticism and judgment. It's about the solar plexus, which is about identity, trust, self-esteem, confidence, power, authority, and ego, all the things that I really feared. And I was like, man, is this what I have to do? It's free to do, but it's so hard. And I was like, stuff it. I'm just going to do it. And yeah, I moved countries. I moved to New Zealand, which is where I live now. And I set up my practice and I was like, I'm just going to practice the way I want. I felt really at risk of practicing out of scope. Yeah. So, but I was like, I'm not healthy. Like I've got to get my health right. Otherwise, I'm just going to be incongruent and I'll probably quit doing what I do because I know that I'm not helping myself, yet I'm trying to advise people. So yeah, as I did it, my skin started to clear. And I also moved to an environment that was better suited to my constitution. So it's more temperate and it's dry here as opposed to hot and humid. And yeah, it all just felt really scary, but I just did it and everything started to flow. Everything started to fall in my lap. All of my intentions started to manifest. And I will still get little skin flare-ups, but I don't get it on my face. I used to have it all over my back and all over my chest. It was painful. I would buy clothes because it would cover certain parts of my skin. I wouldn't want to go out to certain places. It was like, psychologically paralyzing. But yeah, each time I took that leap into just stepping into what I wanted to do and expressing myself how I wanted to, my skin would clear. And even over the last year, I've had little bouts of flares. And I used to say it's because I've eaten gluten or dairy, which I will eat a lot of when I'm stressed. But if I take a step back, what's this next thing I need to express that I'm holding on to? And then when I break through that and I get over it, then my skin clears.
Wow. So your body really is inviting you to step into more power, and will let you know very clearly when you're not doing that.
Yeah. Instead of saying, oh, okay, so that pimple is from eating that burger. It's like that pimple could be, where is it on my body? It's all about location. Where is it? What is it trying to tell me? And how can I tune into what my body wants, how it wants to express itself? So rather than like being annoyed at all of these pimples and stuff, I'm like, okay, what's the message? So embrace it, find amusement in it.
And this piece around, connecting the skin to, criticism and all of these other pieces, where did you learn about that? Was that also part of your training?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint it. Reading and as I say, taking bits and pieces of what I like, seeing the pattern in my clients. So even though I was a physical therapist treating musculoskeletal conditions, as an osteo, you get to go down all sorts of different rabbit holes. And I would see people with skin issues. And it was more just having conversations with people and they're just like, yep, I can so relate to that. So that's what I was saying, is like seeing lots of people and just seeing all of the patterns and how it showed up in different ways. So yeah, down to it, for conditions, it's more about where in your body are you affected. So some people are affected only on their forehead with cystic acne. Other people are affected around their jawline or just on their back. What do all these things mean?
Yes, I was thinking for myself, because when I lived in Germany many years ago, I had cystic acne around my jawline and it was just there, nowhere else on my body.
Yeah. And knowing a little bit of your history, if we can like just a
Yeah,
quick
yeah,
touch on
sure.
this. Like the cystic acne around your jawline, the jawline on your face, because your whole body is represented on your face, but the
Yes.
jawline is your physical. And back then you were pushing, you were doing a lot of stuff. Maybe the environment played a little bit of a part,
Yeah.
but yeah, combo of like pushing masculine, the physical aspect of just doing all the time, but
Mhm.
also yeah, your skin is about how am I expressing myself? And if it's cystic and it's red, then it's like, where is this internal frustration, anger that wants to be expressed to create something? Because remember, anger
Yes.
is healthy, which you know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the creative energy, right? Yes.
Mm.
It's amazing, amazing. And what was, when you were in your psychosomatic training, what were some of the big aha moments for you?
It was really learning in a group and just seeing just that we're humans and we all have our own issues that we want to work on, and no other person's issues are more worthy of being worked on than our own. So I talk about that trauma shame, where sometimes we don't bring it up because we think other people are in so much of worse condition than we are, or
That's
they've
right.
had more horrible things happen to them. But it's just at the end of the day, we're all human. We really want connection, and we really just want this open space to be able to express how we feel without judgment, without feeling like we need to be fixed necessarily.
Yeah.
So for me, that was my first group experience of just showing up with my issues and being vulnerable, but also just really appreciating when other people shared and saw how, yeah, just giving a voice to this stuff could help them shift and move through.
Mm.
It was also the time where I got to understand the release perspective. So, what comes out of our body, verbally, emotionally, physically, physiologically, when we let go of things. So, this is the cathartic part. And
Yes.
I love the catharsis that happens, but I have to emphasize to people that it doesn't mean that you're not doing it right if you're not vomiting or having
Right.
diarrhea.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
catharsis piece. And I'm asking you this question specifically. And I'm so grateful to be talking to you because, there are people in the somatics world who don't believe in catharsis, who
Mm,
don't believe in the vomit, right?
yeah.
So I would love to hear from you sort of what happens physiologically, because I think the listeners really need to hear that piece to give themselves
Yeah.
permission to have it.
Yes. Yeah. So there are so many things. Like there's the physical aspect, which is the movement. I won't go
Yes.
into that too much, but that can be like the jittering and the adrenaline rush that
Yes.
happens. The emotional is like the tears, the anger, the feeling aspect of it. But then the physiological is usually what I feel like scares people. And the physiological is usually what you don't have control over. And it's usually what happens to you when your body really tries to slow you down. And so depending on your constitution or what emotion is going on will depend how you manifest. So if we think physiologically, it can be things like anxiety can cause your heart rate to increase. It can cause you to sweat more. It can other things that can happen is that you can have really bad body odor. And when you're going through an emotional event, you may be physiologically getting random fevers like I was when I was hitting my point of thinking I'm going to get an autoimmune condition. Autoimmune conditions are a physiological response. So it might be arthritis that chooses to attack your joints or your organs. It can be all the crazy autoimmune conditions that don't even have names to them anymore that just affect your skin or wherever in your body. It can be your pee changes. So it's making these correlations that when you have an emotional event or when you start, if you go down this processing, a lot of people, their pee changes. They might be going to the toilet a lot, or their pee stinks, or it changes color. Another common one is more active bowel motions. So people go from being constipated to having just 5, sometimes 10 bowel motions a day. It can be your skin breaks out. So pimples, rashes,
Yes.
and just sickness. So anything that you might have a weakness towards, but we lean into, okay, my weakness is my barometer, but anything that you might have a weakness towards, pain, injury, getting a chest infection all the time, these sort of things can start to come up to the surface because they're just being stored in the body, trying to give you messages.
Yes. It's almost like you open the door and now it's all wanting to come out.
Yeah, exactly. But what's different this time, hopefully, is that you're giving space for it to be there rather than like, oh my God, I get sick all the time. Give me antibiotics. I don't have time for this chest infection. People do it with the emotions. It's like, I can't be sad anymore. I can't be crying every day. It's like, well, you might cry every day for 2 weeks or months, but if you let that out, they will stop at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when we avoid it and don't want to be angry, sad, or we don't want to be sick, people avoid admitting they're sick all the time. Then it stays there for longer. We suppress it for longer.
Yeah.
So shingles is something that's been really common for me, like people breaking out in shingles, even before starting the work or during when we do the work. And I know some people, I think, you talk about people in the somatic world not really getting into the catharsis, is that sometimes when we learn so much, we fear it more. And so you hear all these stories about people being tipped over the edge and re-traumatized and having these cathartic experiences. And depending on how that information is delivered to you, you can fear it.
True.
So I remember with my Western medical acupuncture, I had been needling people with acupuncture needles for a long time, getting an emotional release. But then when I had to do the formal training 10 years later, so that I could needle people in New Zealand, I was like, man, if I learned this at the start, there's no way I would want to stick a needle into someone because I knew too much.
Yeah.
I knew too much of what could go wrong. So yeah, crazy stuff can come up. Like, yeah, on the group programs, there is all sorts of stuff that gets discussed. Periods coming early. People who haven't had periods for months or years get a period, and the period can be very different. Belching, burping. What else? There's some interesting stuff that's going on at the moment. We have a lot of people breaking out in pimples over their temple area. Some people just feeling exhausted. That's more, the emotional, the physical aspect.
Yes. And do you incorporate any things around the nervous system? Is that part of what you teach people?
Yeah. So often we're just like, go for it. But you need to lead yourself. Only you know when you feel safe or unsafe. So you must feel safe to go into this first. And sometimes what comes up a lot in our groups is that your basic needs do need to be met. So if you are in this constant survival mode, your body's not wanting to go into these areas. And that's why our memory sometimes just isn't there for these events, because it doesn't feel safe. Protects us. So yeah, some people are going to nail themselves by going really hard with this work, but we've talked about it, so they know it's nothing new. It's just that maybe they have gone a little bit far. Often we're telling people, okay, in group settings, have a little bit of a break. If it's one-to-one, you can gauge what's going on. So yeah, sometimes you don't need to be processing every single day. It can feel like it will be every single day for the rest of your life when you've suppressed a lot. But again, like anger, sadness, the more you allow it to be there is, I shared with my group the other day that I probably do a process once every 2 weeks or so. And it's over very quickly. And it doesn't need to be a big part of my day that wipes me out.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm always checking in. It's like, is there grief here? No? Okay, good. And if there is, it's like, okay, good. Let's put on some sad music and let it move. And then it's done. Like it's done in sometimes 3 minutes. Yeah.
We overthink it and we're just like, oh, this is too big. And the list gets too overwhelming that we don't start and we just let it build up.
Yeah. This is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of those experiences. I'm just fascinated with the physical manifestations and how our bodies are really sending messages to us constantly, and that we just need to like stop and listen and really drop that question into the body. Like, what is it that you need? Do you need to move? Do you need to express? Like to tune into the body, and it'll let us know exactly what it needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very intelligent. It's very clever. And just go with your intuition. What's the first thing that comes up when you tune into your body?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Jin, so much for being part of the podcast today. And I wanted to, let the listeners know where people can find you.
Sure. So I think probably the best start is the podcast, which is called The Art of Listening to Your Body. My website is drjinong.com, and then you can be led down all sorts of rabbit holes, hopefully, simplified rabbit holes on how you can pursue this work. I do group programs through the Art of Listening to Your Body website, and that's like a group program that's open to anyone and everyone. And this is where you get coached and supported in a group on doing these releases, and the group energy is amazing. I also train practitioners, so any type of practitioner, conventional, traditional, alternative, into wanting to bring this work into their practice. And a lot of them say it's the missing piece. And I do work with a small group of one-to-one clients now and then throughout the year, and coach practitioners to build this into their business and create sustainable businesses for themselves.
Amazing. How long is the practitioner training?
It's 10 weeks, but quite a few of those people go on to do a ongoing mastermind to really implement this work and build that sustainable business.
Fantastic.
And also Instagram, The Art of Listening to Your Body. And I've got Facebook as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. It was such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on here, Isha.
Okay.